Welcome to another episode of Called Bank Sports. It's just me today. And so this is actually going to mainly be a post-game review of the Mavericks game, which the Jazz won, which is great. I'll also kind of talk about more general NBA stuff, how the Jazz have been doing, and I'll jump into that now. It's just me today because Nate, he has some family in from actually out of country, so he wanted to take a weekend and spend more time with them. So it's just me for this week, but I know some of you may be asking about the hat giveaway that we talked about last video. We did hit the like goal, so we put everyone who commented in a list, random number generator, and that's how we did our drawing. So we contacted the winner in the comment section of last video. Go check if we contacted you. If we don't hear back from them in the next few days, we'll probably just run it again and there'll be a new winner. So if it wasn't you, I guess there's a small chance if we don't hear back from them that you can win this one. And there's no new giveaway for this week, but we will have more coming down. So if you're a Jazz fan, if you want a chance at winning that Jazz hat, we do have a few more. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe. It helps us grow the channel, and it will make sure that you hear about or follow if you're on a different program, but make sure you hear about our next giveaways. So yeah, so with that, I don't want to jump right into the game. And actually, Nate and I went to this game last night, so that was super fun. It was a really good game to watch. We saw some great stuff from Luka. He didn't have the best game. His shooting was a little bit off. We saw a small comeback from the Jazz, and then they iced the game right at the end. So it was great to see. I did want to talk about, there's one thing, and I think I started hearing this a little bit before the All-Star break, and then I started hearing it a lot more around the All-Star break, and then the few days that since the All-Star break. A lot of people in national media are talking about how, because historically the Western Conference has been the best conference by far, right? And people are talking about how the East has been catching up, which is true. The East is a lot more competitive this year, but people are starting to talk about how the West just isn't competitive. There's no real contenders in the West. All the real contenders are in the East, which I think is ridiculous. I'll just put it that way. The East is a lot more competitive, so honestly, I'm a lot more excited for the Eastern Conference side of the playoffs because the pack is so close that I think any matchup that you get is going to be a pretty good matchup. The West, I think, will have some really good matchups. I think there's some teams that have like the Lakers, that have star power, but they're just underperforming. And even in the playoffs, I don't think there'll be a great matchup for a top tier team, which it looks like if they even make it past through the play-ins, they'll be playing like a Suns or a Warriors. And I think the Suns or Warriors could just have it wouldn't be a close series is what I'm predicting. So, and the Lakers could improve, but I wanted to look at it because I wasn't quite seeing that. Granted, I do follow the Western Conference a lot closer than the Eastern, but I wasn't seeing it, especially when you look at the standings. The Phoenix Suns are at 49 wins. There's a tie for first in the East, and they're at 39 wins, 10 wins below. And so I was like, okay, that's just the very top of the league, of the conferences. We can't judge it there. So I went through and I judged it. I went and I took the wins and losses of each of the top 10 teams in each conference, added them up. I know there's some really advanced math, you could do the same thing in 2 minutes. But right now, the West has 354 wins versus the East having 341. And the East has played, I think, 4 or 5 less games, so it could be up to 346, but still, there's a discrepancy. It's close, though. I know in past years it wasn't nearly that close. And if you look at win percentage, the West has a win percentage just about 2 percentage points higher than the East, so it's close. But I don't get, if you're looking at standings, I don't get why people are saying that the East is just the much better conference. All of the contenders are in the East. Here's my theory for it, is that I feel like people compare teams to their conference. I think that's one of the reasons. So you look at everyone in the East and they all look so competitive. It's all super close. So because it's so competitive, there's all these competitive teams. All of them are looking like championship contenders because you're hearing people saying, "Oh, the Heat are a contender, the Bulls are contenders, the Sixers are contenders, the Bucks are contenders." Some people are talking about the Cavs maybe slipping in there. That's not going to happen. If it does, that would be amazing. The Nets, who are down at the 8th spot right now, once they get healthy, they're contenders again, even though their record doesn't quite show that. So, like, yeah, there's a lot of teams. I could see all of them coming out of the East because the East is competitive. And how we define contender isn't what are your odds of winning a championship, it's what are your odds of getting to the finals. And so when there's so many competitive teams in the East, it makes it look like all of them are amazing. Now, if you look at the West, you look at team, like, it feels like a 2-team race. I don't want to sound pessimistic about the Jazz, but I'm not including the Jazz in that 2-team race. I'm not including the Grizzlies. I'm not including the Mavericks. I think it's really like the West, the spread is a lot wider. It feels like. Which is true, because if you look at the first team, we're at 49 wins. The 10th team is at 25 wins, compared to the East, 39 wins and 28 wins. So the East is a lot tighter. And so it feels like a 2-man race in the West between the Suns and the Warriors. I think the Grizzlies are great. I think the Grizzlies have a shot at making it through the West. I wouldn't put them as... I think there's a big drop off between the Warriors and the Grizzlies' chances. Same thing between the Warriors and the Jazz's chances. So I think it's going to be the Suns or Warriors coming out of the West at this point. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying if we were to run this season, a simulation 100 times, one of those two teams would make it out more than half of the time. I'd be shocked if any team below the Jazz in the standings made it out of the West. I think the Mavericks are probably a first-round exit. Obviously, Luka's great, and we'll talk more about the Mavericks in a bit, but like, they might slip out of the first round. I think they're a first-round exit. The Nuggets, if they're healthy, I could see something happening, but it's tough to come in where you're missing one of your top 2 players all season, then he comes back healthy, and you can't really expect to compete at the same level that you would otherwise. Same story for the Clippers. The Lakers are just kind of a mess right now. I can't see them being competitive in a playoff environment. I thought they'd be more competitive this season, but I can't see them, like, with the depth they have, I can't see them being terribly competitive in a playoff environment. The Blazers are tanking. They might not even make the play-in. The Timberwolves, I think they should be happy if they win a playoff game. I'll put it that way. I don't think they're a great team. They're not, like, they have some fun players, but they're not a particularly great team, and they got beat bad by the Sixers last night. So that's kind of how I'm looking at why people are seeing it that way, because contender is getting to the finals, not winning the finals. And I think a lot of people kind of in the back of their mind, they feel the Warriors are washed up, which they aren't. They're not the same team that they had with Kevin Durant, but they're still a really good team, and they have some good depth. Not the best depth, but they have some good depth that they didn't have with Kevin Durant. So I think they're going to be a scary team to play in the finals. I feel like a lot of people have been sleeping on the Suns. I think Chris Paul has just had some bad press for a lot of seasons, and people just don't want to accept that he's still an elite point guard. I think people don't realize how good Devin Booker is. People aren't realizing how great DeAndre Ayton is fitting into the team, and the Suns are really deep. So I think people are sleeping on them, and that's why that's happening. So I want to have that conversation. I wish Nate was here to have it. We chatted a little bit about it that last night, but not so much in depth. So yeah, I'll jump into the Mavs game now, but that was something on my mind that was bugging me, and I kept hearing it, so I started believing it, but then I kind of wanted to look at the numbers and figure out why people were thinking that way. Let's jump into this Jazz game. For those of you who haven't watched it, like, it was a fun game. It was. I don't want to go through the stats as much. I'll go through it a little bit, but it's really the Mavs got off to a hot start. The Jazz came back and kind of kept it close, but it was really the Mavs were winning most of the game. The Jazz took a lead a few times, but the Mavs were winning, which looking at the numbers is kind of shocking to me. Luka had a Luka game, but his shooting was pretty awful. He was 8 for 24 from the field. He still was 3 rebounds off of a triple-double, but he wasn't really getting much help. Like Dwight Powell had 22, but I bet most of those points were assisted from Luka. Spencer Dinwiddie came in and scored 20 points, just purely isolation ball, which Spencer Dinwiddie's really good, but you're not going to win games playing isolation ball. And Davis Bertans, he came in with, I know I wasn't going to talk about stats, but this is all the help Luka had last night. Davis Bertans came in and hit some threes, and he had 17 points, which is probably one of the bigger reasons why the Mavs, Davis Bertans had the best plus minus on the team. And the second best didn't do anything. He just happened being in with good lineups. So Davis Bertans' threes were really the reason the Mavs were up. I think the Jazz were playing better basketball. The Jazz were the better team the whole game. But I think why it was so close down to the end is the Mavs had some stupid turnovers. The Jazz had a lot more stupid turnovers. But if you look at the play-by-play, if you haven't watched the game, go look at the fourth quarter. Just the fourth quarter play-by-play, because the Jazz had 18 turnovers during the game. You'll see the last time the Jazz turned the ball over is 7 minutes left in the fourth. They were down by 3 with 7 minutes left in the fourth. They turned the ball over. They never turn it over again. So they get 7 minutes, 0 turnovers, and they end up winning by 5. So they have a +8 during those 7 minutes, which isn't like mind-boggling, but that's really good. For every minute, you're getting more than a point advantage on your teammate. That's pretty good. So I think it kind of shows that, and not that any turnover is like acceptable, but it hurts when it's a very preventable turnover. Like Donovan Mitchell throwing the ball out of bounds, or a player catching the ball and trying to drive and they step back out of bounds to start their drive. Like those are just really preventable turnovers that are stupid, and you don't even expect most high school players to make turnovers like that, which is frustrating watching the Jazz do stuff like that. So if they didn't have a lot of those turnovers, it would have been a much different game. The Jazz probably would have been ahead the whole time. So that's kind of my take on the game. I do want to say, like, I want to shout out Mitchell real quick, and then I want to talk about the Doncic-Gobert matchup in the fourth quarter, which if you didn't watch the game, I think it's really interesting to talk about. And for those of you who don't know, like, this is a Jazz podcast. I love the Jazz. But I'm a Mavs fan, number one. I actually went and we can talk about the Mavs a little bit, but I went and I don't have high hopes for the Mavs this playoff season. I don't think there's a roster around Luka. So I went into the game like not really caring who won. I was actually kind of rooting for the Jazz to win. Mainly I wanted a good game, and I got that. So I was really happy with that. But when it came down to clutch, I said, so Donovan Mitchell had the last turnover for the Jazz at 7 minutes. From that 7-minute mark on, Donovan Mitchell was clutch. Like I think the ball should have gone through him more the whole game. If it did, he probably would have been closer to 50 points, because he was playing good last night. He was 7 for 12 from 3, 11 for 19 from the field, ended with 33 points. But when it came time to win the game, Donovan Mitchell stepped up and won the game for the Jazz. I'm not saying no one else did anything, but it was like Donovan Mitchell is one of those players where it comes to the clutch and he wants that weight on his shoulders, and he delivers when it comes to those clutch moments when you need to close out a game. So that is an amazing ability for a star player. I love to see it. He was amazing last night. So then the flip side, the Mavs were trying to close out the game as well. It was really close for in the fourth quarter, trying to close out the game. So the Jazz went a lot to Mitchell. They did move, like Bogey hit a 3, which pretty much iced it. Not quite. I think Conley's free throws in the end iced it, but Bogey hit a 3. I'm not sure who assisted him, but that was huge. So the Jazz did play the team thing in the clutch, which I think is really important. A lot of people go through one player, which is exactly what the Mavs did. The Mavs gave the ball to Luka. Luka wasn't even looking to pass. If he passed, they got the ball right back to him. And obviously it didn't work out. He missed a lot of shots right there in the clutch. And something interesting is on the clutch. So the Mavs would bring the ball down. Royce O'Neal would pick up Luka. And Royce O'Neal was not making life fun for Luka. He's a lot stronger than him. He was being as physical as he could on Luka Doncic. And so what the Mavs would do every time is they would force a switch. So they had a matchup of Rudy Gobert guarding Luka Doncic on the 3-point line. And Rudy Gobert really won the matchup most of the times because Luka would try to go one-on-one with him down low in the post and try to get one of his little floater things, which he's really good at. And Gobert just didn't give him any room to get anything off. Doncic did hit a mid-range jumper and I think a three-pointer on him, but that was about it. Gobert really shut everything else down. And so here, and I think it was really noticeable last night when Gobert was off the floor because, I don't know, just watching Gobert on defense is something really beautiful. Like, you should just take a Utah Jazz game, and just only watch Gobert when he's on the floor, just to, especially on the defensive end, just to see the kind of movement and what he does. So I don't think that was a smart move by the Mavs to force that matchup. But if you're forcing that matchup, I think what you have to do is you now have the Jazz's best defender, who is also their post anchor, out on the 3-point line. Guess what's wide open? And it's the paint. And no one else on the Jazz who was out on the floor could really guard the paint. Like Royce O'Neal, it wouldn't be easy, but you could easily force a matchup off ball and get someone. You need to look for a lob. You need to look for a cutter, or like get something down low when Gobert's up out on the 3-point line. And I think the Mavs would have had a much better shot at winning if Luka was forced the matchup with Gobert, and then rather for looking to take a shot on Gobert, which is tough from anywhere. You need a lot of space to get a shot over him, and you're not getting anything down low on him. So I think Luka should have been looking for passes, and they should have been running a lot of off-ball screens to get someone open, preferably down low in the paint. So the Jazz did get a little bit lucky that the Mavs weren't looking for that, but also I'm not going to put it all on luck. The Mavs forced this situation. They were doing what they wanted, and the Jazz shut down and didn't let the Mavs get what they want. So that's really the point of defense. And maybe they would have shut it down if the Mavs went for the off-ball stuff. Like, they just didn't try, so there was no need for the defense to shut that down. So I think it was a great game. Luka needs a lot of help around him on his roster. That roster's not great, but Luka is amazing. And the Jazz looked really good if it weren't for the turnovers. I will go through the team stats real quick because I think those are fun to track. I talked about turnovers, so I'll kind of skip that. But the Jazz ended up shooting 54% from the field, 42% from three, and they hit 18 free throws and shot 82% as a team from the free throw line. So the Jazz were, and a lot of that was second half. I think going into halftime, the Jazz were like under 50% from the field, and the Mavs were up like 58%. Maybe it wasn't going, maybe it was a little earlier than that, but the Mavs ended up with 48%. So the Jazz, their defense stepped up in the second half. Their shots started falling more in the second half. So it was a great second half effort. And at halftime, I think the Jazz were going into halftime down by 3. I think it was tied, and then the Mavs hit like a buzzer beater 3 to go into half or something like that. But looking at the stats from halftime, I remember Nate and I were reviewing them, and we were both maybe Nate a little less confident just because it's more nervous when it's your number one team down at half against the Mavs, who are a pretty good team. But I think we were both pretty confident that the Jazz were going to win purely because of the rebound battle. The Jazz were +5 on rebounds going into the half. They finished +14. And like in close games like that, unless you just can't get the ball in the basket, like that's the number one thing. You need to score. But if your shooting percentage is good enough, around average, and you're beating them on the rebounds by 10 plus rebounds for the game, you're probably going to win. That's kind of where you like the rebounds can decide a lot of games. So I think that's what it came down to. The Mavs they didn't really play a center. They do have Boban, but he didn't play at all. They were really playing Dwight Powell, who's really more of a power forward. So the Jazz just dominated the rebound game, and that was largely because of Gobert. I think he had like 17 rebounds or something. Let me double check that. If it wants to load. Yeah, he had 14 points, 17 rebounds, and 3 blocks. One of those was a really clutch block as well. So that's kind of my review of the game, and my thoughts on Eastern versus Western Conference. I know, I don't know. Do you guys get bored when I ramble at the camera like this? These were kind of my thoughts, my breakdown. I do tend to talk a lot when I'm in front of the camera. Like, this is 20 minutes. Normally our videos are a little bit shorter, but let me know what you thought of the game if you watched it. What were your takeaways? And let me know about the whole East-West thing. Is me like just looking at the standings? Is that too simple of a view to analyze that? Do I need to look deeper into that? Because I know standings, the East plays the East a lot more, so it would make sense that maybe some of the top teams lose a little bit more. So let me know if there's a better way to analyze that. But thanks for tuning in. Like the video if you liked it. Follow our channel on whichever platform you're watching or listening to us on. And thanks for joining me today.